Welcome back to Tech Minded, where we help you get more from tech. Today we're going to be installing this new battery in an iPhone 6s Plus. It's been a while since I've done a tutorial style video, so I wanted to take it back to where Tech Minded originally started and give this a try. Now, replacing these batteries is a whole lot easier than you think, especially in these older iPhones. This kit provides everything you need, including all of the tools that you'll need to remove the old battery and install the new one. Now I'm going to go ahead and speed this up while I unpack the box, and we'll get started. So this is the fresh battery that you get. Comes in a little plastic wrapper. You've got tweezers to help you hold the screws, various different prying tools, and then there's a screwdriver for the screws in the bottom of the phone, and then there's another screwdriver for screws inside the phone, which is Phillips head. First, you're going to take these Torx screws and remove them from the bottom of the phone. This is the little Torx driver that they include with the kit. And the two screws are right on the left and right side of the charging port. So you just stick that in and pull both of those screws out. Now that we've removed those screws, you want to set them aside. That way you don't lose them. They're really small and hard to keep up with, so make sure you put them in a safe place while you continue this project. Also, make sure you power your phone off so you don't have any issues when you're disconnecting the battery later on. Now you're going to take the suction cup that's included in the kit and place it right above the home button. This is going to give you a little bit of leverage when you're trying to pull the screen out, or pull the assembly out, I guess, and separate it from the rear case of the phone. And just find a little gap you can find in between the case and the screen assembly, and just try to spread it apart. You always want to start at the bottom with this particular phone because there are clips on the top that hold it together. And as you can see, it comes apart really easily. So I'm just going to follow the line around the phone and make sure I separate it. There's a small amount of adhesive that holds this together. So if you can't get it immediately, you can always heat it up with a hairdryer or a heat gun lightly to try to separate that adhesive. And once you've got it all released, the screen of the phone just lifts off just like that. In my case, I have an extra set of hands to help hold the top of the phone up. You don't want to just let it fall. You need to do some kind of support. But first, we're going to remove this little shield. There are two Phillips head screws on this tiny shield that covers the power connector, the connector from the battery to the phone. So remove those two little screws, and then you'll be able to lift the little metal plate up, and that'll expose the battery connector itself. And if the first two screws weren't hard enough to keep up with, these are even smaller. So if you drop them down in those cracks, you can easily use those tweezers to pull them back out and set them aside. That way you can keep up with them. Now that we have the shield out of the way, we want to disconnect the battery. So use one of your little plastic pry tools to grab the plastic part of the battery. It's the little black connector there, and pry up on it. Now you don't want to force this. It should come off very easily. So just take your time and get your tool underneath it and pry it up. And just like that, it'll pop up and you'll be able to disconnect it from the phone. And that is the only wire that connects this battery to the phone. But before we can remove the old battery, we have to remove the adhesive behind it. The battery is held in with 3 strips of adhesive, and this may be a part where you want to get your heat gun again, but I'd also caution you to not heat that battery up too much. This nice little black pry bar they provide helps you scrape up under the battery to help separate it from the old adhesive. So just gently work your way around and try to remove that battery, and make sure you don't damage anything in the process. It takes a little wiggling and working your way under it, but eventually you can separate it and the battery will come right out. And that's how easy it is to remove the battery. So now what we're going to do is just remove this old adhesive, because our new kit came with brand new adhesive. So I'm going to speed this up because it took a few minutes to get it all off of there. Now all of the adhesive is removed and we have a clean base to install our new battery. You can wipe this down with a little alcohol if you want to make sure the surface is even more clean, but the adhesive they give is really strong, and I've never had any issues in all the batteries I've replaced. I'm going to show you here how small and fragile the battery connector is. It's plastic with 2 small prongs in it to connect, so be careful when you're prying around it, and also make sure it's clean before you install the new battery. I didn't have to clean this one because it was already nice and clean, so that's not going to be an issue. Here I've sped up the process of going around the corners and removing the old adhesive around the corners and edges that held the screen on. So you can go around and pick that off with your tweezers. It'll only take a minute. The next step in this process is to go ahead and install the new adhesive strips. They come on a little film like this, and you'll just peel off the back and then lay these strips down. Make sure they make a good solid connection on there, that way they'll stick, and then you just pull the film off. The 3 black tabs at the top can be pulled off. I pulled one of them off, and then the other 2 I just left on. In case I have to replace this again, it might help me remove them in the future. But you just want to make sure those are stuck down nice and solid, and once you touch them you'll know they're incredibly sticky. Now at this point we're going to go ahead and unwrap our brand new battery and prepare it for installation. I like to do a little test fit to make sure everything lines up right, and then what I'm going to do is go ahead and connect the battery connector. My hand's covering up, but you want to place the connector on top of the connection port and then pop it into place before you stick that battery down, just to make sure there's no tension on any of the cables once you get it installed. And then just press down firmly on the battery to make sure that it's stuck down onto the adhesive. Then we're going to replace this little plate that we removed and the 2 little Phillips head screws that go into it. Now that that's all secure, we're ready to replace the adhesive that holds the screen on. Now I ran into a little bit of an issue here because some of the screws at the top would not come out with a screwdriver I had. To keep from having to strip the screws out or lose any of them, I decided to just trim the adhesive and use it in 2 pieces. So here you're going to see me line up the adhesive to make sure it's going to fit right and see where I need to make the cut. And then a small pair of sharp scissors are used to cut the top of this off. Now I can lay the adhesive down in a bottom portion and then flip the phone over and I'll be able to install the top portion. So I've peeled the back off of the adhesive. This is a very thin strip of adhesive, so try really hard to line it up the best you can. I've found that the corners are the easiest way to line it up because they're little plastic blocks that they sit on. Once you get those corners lined up, you can push the edges down into the sides of the phone where they're supposed to lay. And then you have to peel the adhesive backing off to release the little adhesive strips. Now this is easier said than done, but if you work with it for a minute you'll eventually get it. I had to use my tweezers a little bit to make sure that it was pulled off of the backing to get as much adhesive down onto the phone as I could. At this point I flipped the phone over and make sure to keep the screen separated from the back side of the phone while I'm installing the top portion of the adhesive. This point won't be necessary if you can actually get the screws out of those shields on the top of your phone. I decided to do it this way because I didn't really have any other choice other than actually leaving the adhesive off, and I just didn't want to do that. So I had to cut it to make it work, and this is how I made it work. It still lays in there just fine, and it will make sure that the phone screen adheres to the back of the phone and everything sticks together. It creates a nice seal once you get it all put back together. So I've trimmed out my adhesive here, and I'm just going to lay it down in the seam again, just like we did on the bottom of the phone. And I'll speed this process up real quick because it only took a minute or 2, but it actually went in well. And then we will stick the screen down on this phone. Now we have all the adhesive in, and you want to make sure to put the top of the phone back in first, because there are little tabs on there that line up inside of the case. So slide the top of the phone back in and then press firmly on the bottom to make sure it all snaps back into place. And it should all line up just fine. And now you have a nice sealed phone. Here a little piece of the adhesive got out on the left side, but I just took some scissors and just trimmed that little piece off that came out. It's not going to really affect anything because we have all of the other adhesive that's still holding it on. You'll have small issues like this when you do it yourself, but it's not really a big deal, considering in the poor shape that the old adhesive was in. So now we've got the phone sealed back up and put back together. All that's left to do at this point is to put those screws back in the bottom. So now I'm going to grab my 2 little Torx screws and install them back into the bottom where we took them out. Alright, so we're getting these screws in, and then the phone will be ready to try out. So once we've got those in, you can lay it down and pull the suction cup off and turn on the power. Once the power comes on, then we know that we've obviously got a battery in there and the battery is working. So we'll let it power up and see what the battery level is. Now in the installation manual, they recommend that you let the battery drain down to 5% and then charge it up to 100%, and do this about 3 or 4 times. That way it helps to calibrate the battery. That'll help you get a lot longer life out of your battery, because these batteries tend to have memory from what I hear. So try to go through that process if you can, so this battery will last a lot longer than your other one did. Thanks for coming by and watching the video. Don't forget to subscribe, because I'm coming out with a lot of new content in the next few months.